Scrum is bad. Terrible. Throw it away. It's ridiculous. Developers become part of a mindless micro-conveyor belt. It becomes about ticking cards. It's a fertile ground for micromanagers to make sure that every card is ticked. The product owner is not even acquainted with coding most of the time. He's done a course. The Scrum Master is, who knows what kind of role they've been in before. Maybe some business analytical role. What's he got to do with software development? Often you find they don't have the right skills to control a software project. And Scrum is not about management in that sense. It's about not managing. It's like if you've got cards and you can look at what's ticked and what's in progress and burn down charts and all these other things and have a retrospective at the end, you don't have to manage during the day. You can go do something else. And isn't it saddening that the ones that do not have to be accountable, the Scrum Master and the product owner, well, they don't have to fill in anything. They don't have to have the burn down charts for their stuff. No, of course not. It's the developers, and the developers need to be herded. The developers need to be herded into a conveyor belt, and sort of there they are, and they need to be, they don't know how to communicate. Of course not. How do they know how to have meetings or talk or do anything constructive? And they don't understand our business, do they? They're developers, right? So we've got to herd them together, control every aspect of it. Well, what happens is design goes out the window. Everything becomes about refactoring. We'll do it later, we'll refactor it later, we'll refactor. And if it becomes too hard to refactor, it goes on the backlog, and then there it sits, right? So it becomes less about Scrum. Scrum is less about Agile, I should say. Scrum isn't Agile. It has nothing in common with the Agile Manifesto whatsoever. And as developers, you lose the will to code, to think. You don't want to be part of anything. You're just going to tick a card. And at the end of a repetitive iteration, you're sequestered by, the Holy Father for confessions. And you have to give them the ammunition to use against you in the next iteration again. Oh, sorry, I didn't manage to finish the card because... And then they throw that back at you again in the next iteration. None of it is real. It's just process. Every card becomes the goal, right? The process becomes the target. Developers just lose creativity. I mean, your whole being just crumbles. I mean, all you do is follow a card. That's what you have to do. Design is out the window. You can't sit back and say, I'm going to have a week or so to design something, and I'm going to implement it, and I'm going to get people to look at it from an API standpoint and see if they can use it properly, and then I'm going to reiterate that and then come up with something good. And if it didn't take 5 days and it took 7, so what? Right? If it took 10 days, so what? Are you building quality? Do you want something to go out well? Do you want something good out there that actually works? Or do you want to do a piecemeal, small one-day little thing and another one-day little thing, and we'll just add to it, no design, just having a torchlight in a dark room, and we're just going to follow and see where we go. And this is what people are doing. And refactoring becomes an excuse. Refactoring was, the spirit of taking something that was done incorrectly and modifying it to something else, without rewriting or reworking the code. And refactoring is something decent. It's something, something that we should be doing and can be improving our code all the time. But it's not an excuse. It's not, I'm going to do it badly so that I can do it well later. And then when later comes, I'll do it later. And just keep moving the target. And a lot of costs come into that. Every time you refactor, it's redoing something you could have done. I've been in environments where I can see the end goal 3 months from now. And if we only sat back and took 2 weeks now, we could have solved all those problems. But instead, for 3 months, people are refactoring in order to get to that goal. And 3 months takes 6 months. You still don't have that feature. You still don't have that thing that you could have done in the beginning, right? And then it's all about balance, right? So they use things like over-design as somehow an excuse. That's the reason why we don't design it overall, is because some dude somewhere with beards and hats, over-design something occasionally, right? That's not how it should work, right? Design is design. It's there for a reason, right? You design something well, you implement it well, and you've got a good product. If you make bad decisions, or you don't make any design decisions, you just let it organically grow with different developers grabbing cards willy-nilly and just doing it whenever they want, you're not going to get that design. Agile is supposed to be malleable. It's supposed to be something that is changeable. And how opposite is Scrum? It's the most unmodifiable thing I've ever encountered. We are all heathens, right? How dare you challenge Scrum? Repent. I mean, it's a religion that's formed around this. And really, it's the worst thing I've ever become part of. I can feel my intellect just swirling out my ears every time I'm in a room of Scrum people. It's just all about the process, and it's got nothing to do with creativity or quality or good of anything else. So I've written down just the top things that I think are the worst about Scrum. So I'll just read them off. So good design is marginalized. I mean, that's absolutely true. You'll find that design just takes a back seat every single time. Everything that is not done correctly is regarded as, we'll refactor that later. And that's what it becomes, a refactoring excuse. And if it can't be refactored, or it's too complicated, too solid, too architectural, well, then suddenly it becomes something part of the backlog, and we'll deal with that at some other time. It assumes developers need herding into a production line. It facilitates micromanagement. It allows management not to manage, but look at charts and pretend they're managing. It reduces the team's ability to innovate and design things themselves and actually work for themselves and be able to do stuff. So you're taking away their responsibility and in a way, their accountability, and instead replacing it with cards and ticking, right? Developers are made somehow more accountable, but by numbers that don't mean anything. Like, how many cards have you done? Have you finished these cards? Like, how many outstanding? I mean, it's these things don't matter. A card doesn't express the complexity. And it's also normalizing developers. Our whole team is normalized to the common denominator. Like, just because a couple of bad developers need whipping and keeping in line, perhaps, now the whole team's got to suffer for that. Right? So you're dumbing down the entire team. And lastly, it's completely hypocritical. It's against the Agile Manifesto. It's against common sense, and it's often against the positive outcomes for your business. It's the worst thing you can adopt. And I'll end with this. I wrote it down just to get the wording correct. Don't despair. If you've been implementing a form of Scrum and it's working for you, think how good you'll be without it.